Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic, let's go. What's the most paranormal thing you've ever seen? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was about 16 at the time, out drinking with my girlfriend. It was about midnight, and we were walking back to my house. There were two ways to get there: a busy street and a long bike path through the woods, so we took the bike path. I was walking about 6 feet in front of her, and I got that feeling, like something was watching us. It was like a bee sting somewhere I'd never felt before, and I just knew something bad was about to happen. In a split second, I heard it, an "ah" sound, like someone forcing all the air from their lungs, and she screamed as I turned around to see her face plant on the cement. She asked me why I pushed her. She was mad, but got confused when she realized I was ahead of her. I was not in arm's reach of her. She heard that loud breath scream right in her ear when something pushed her hard. We booked it back to the other route to my house, taking an extra hour to avoid that path through the woods. When she took off her shirt at my house, she had 2 bruises on her back. No one believed us, and we never walked that path at night again. I have witnessed very many paranormal things. One of them that sticks out the most is the night after my dad passed away. He was a true believer in the paranormal, and he was very superstitious. Bad things would always happen to him on Friday the 13th. He just so happened to die on Friday the 13th. He would often joke that when he died, he would come back and haunt people. Well, my sister, mom, and I were sitting at the kitchen table that night after his death when all of a sudden the cabinet next to the table flung open with great force. We all kind of looked at each other and were like, there's no way. So my sister went over to the cabinet and shut the doors. That particular cabinet had been painted over many times, and the doors were really hard to open. My sister pulled on the doors to make sure that they were closed good. A few minutes later, the cabinet flung open again. I'm pretty sure it was my dad messing with us. Those cabinet doors have never done that before, and they haven't done it since. But I have had so many paranormal things happen to me, I could probably write a book. My dad had many stories too. I was around 18 years old at the time and stayed at home with my mom, quite a few years ago now. In any case, it was late at night, approximately 2 a.m. Was in bed at the time, and I thought I heard something in the kitchen. Being the male of the house, I grabbed a metal dumbbell, as thought it was or may be an intruder, and cautiously and slowly made my way down the stairs. I left the lights off, as I didn't want to spook any would-be intruder, and when going down the stairs, I had a strange uneasiness. You know that feeling where you think something is going to happen? That really weird gut feeling? That fight or flight sensation had totally gripped me. I'm not sure if it was adrenaline or whatever, but I felt alert, and something just didn't sit right with me. With each step by step going down the stairs, the feeling got more and more intense. I eventually get to the kitchen where I thought I had heard the noise and go to switch the kitchen light on. As soon as I flipped the switch, as quick as a flash, the kitchen was vividly bright light. Like intense, super bright. Saw an old woman sitting at our kitchen table looking in my direction. She was wearing a white nightgown, and she asks me, "Is that you, Bobby?" It felt like time stood still. I was frozen in place, unable to answer her question. Next thing I know, I blink and she's gone. The kitchen is quiet and empty, normally light. No amazingly bright light. Everything is in place, and the old lady is no longer sitting at the kitchen table. Again, I just stood there in utter shock. Heart pounding in my chest, trying to rationalize what I saw. I'm a massive skeptic as well, justifying to myself I'm probably still just dreaming, laughing quietly to myself, wow, what an imagination. I check the other rooms, settle my nerves, and head back to bed. After about 20 minutes of thinking it all over, I managed to get back to sleep. So I get up late the next day and tell my mom the story, half mocking myself in the process. Haha, I saw a ghost last night and she was looking for Bobby, but she must have been disappointed when she saw me. Ha ha ha. My mom then went on to tell me that before we moved in, an old lady passed away in the house, and her husband, Robert, was called Bobby. He passed away a couple of years before her. So, not sure what to make of it. As I say, a bit of a skeptic, but hard to rationalize what I saw or heard. Still puzzles me to this day, 17 years later. I have multiple stories. I love telling them cause they were never creepy to me since I knew who it was. When I was 15, my grandmother passed away in her sleep at 52 years old, and 2 years later, we ended up moving in with my grandfather to help him pay his bills. Anyway, after my brother was born when I was 17, I was the live-in babysitter for my mom, so I was home alone a lot with him. But anytime we would put him to bed and he would stir, I swear we would hear my grandmother shushing and lulling him back to sleep. As the years went on, the activity happened more and more, and I was used to it by then. But my younger sister, who lives with my dad, didn't know or believe that this was going on often. So one night, when she was spending the night with me and my brother, who was about 2 at the time, we were in the basement. We could hear shuffling upstairs, like those hard-soled slippers everyone's grandparents wore in the early 2000s, go straight from her room down the hallway to the kitchen, turning on the tea kettle and the TV, along with blues music pumping out of her room out of nothing. My sister was so creeped out that she called my dad crying, asking to be picked up, lol. Another incident, same house, I was laying on the couch in the living room upstairs. There is this window-shaped mirror at the other side of the living room that if you looked into it from the position I was in, I could see the wall directly above me. Well, I legit looked in that mirror and I seriously saw my grandmother's face coming out of the wall looking down at me smiling. Never once was I creeped out because when she was living, we were really close, and her sticking around after passing away was comforting in a way. But yeah, those are my main experiences. I mean, if you have a ghost or a spirit or whatever you guys call it, and it's helpful and not threatening, then yeah, no need to go crazy about it. Enjoy. Okay, this is my story. It kind of changed the way I look at life and death now. I was a student in Maastricht, Netherlands at the time. One afternoon, my mother and I went to the local cemetery to visit and clean the grave of my grandmother. As we were watching the graves, we talked about life, death, and possible life after death. Since I was highly convinced there wasn't any life after death, I decided that this was the perfect place and time to bravely state out loud that if there indeed was any life after death, it could reveal itself to me there and then. That I was open for it. Immediately I felt quite uncomfortable, but I assumed that was irrational. Nothing happened, no sign of the dead. So we cleaned the grave, drank some coffee afterwards. My mom went home, and I went to my student home. I forgot about the whole cemetery thing, and my girlfriend came over. We watched some movie and eventually went to bed. In bed, we were talking about random happy stuff, and were getting ready to sleep. We said good night and laid down to sleep. Then out of nowhere, I felt very, very uncomfortable. At that exact moment, my girlfriend said that she also felt uncomfortable and wanted to lay against me, and so she did, holding me tight. Those were the last words we spoke that night. I'll try to explain what I experienced. At first, I thought it was her discomfort that I was feeling, which would have been very strange. Then something even stranger unfolded. An invisible, intense presence of panic and fear entered the room and rapidly grew stronger. There was nothing to physically see, but the air in the room became very thick. Then a sort of invisible ball of panic seemed to bounce from wall to wall. Convinced this was all happening in my head, I was afraid that I was having a stroke or psychosis or something like that. I decided to sit it out, and I closed my eyes. But then, in my head, with my eyes closed, I could vaguely see the shape of a man flashing by. Only a couple of times. It was a man of about 50 years old, with a beer belly and a goatee. He had a disproportionately big mouth and was screaming in total fear. He was obviously the ball of panic, bouncing from wall to wall in my room. Not knowing what to do with the surreal situation, I started talking to the goatee guy in my head. Like how you can talk in your head, I said things like, "There is nothing I can do for you," and "Please go away." But that clearly didn't reach him. This all was quite an intense, surreal experience of utter chaos, panic, fear, and thick air filling my small room. It seemed to last 10 minutes, but it was probably way shorter. And then, from one moment to another, it was gone. The room was empty again, like the worst thunderstorm suddenly made place for a sunny day with whistling birds. I barely ever felt so incredibly relieved, and because of that I fell asleep almost instantly. The next day, my girlfriend and I got up just like any other morning, and in the kitchen we drank a coffee to get powered up for the day. I forgot the whole thing until my girlfriend told me that she really felt very uncomfortable the night before. Remembering everything again, I told her I also felt really uncomfortable and told her I felt a presence of panic in the room. She said she experienced the same panic and told me that she even vaguely saw the shape of a guy in his 50s with a beer belly. She said, I said, "No way, with a goatee?" And she started crying. "With a goatee," she says. We're both very shocked. Apparently, the night before, we experienced the exact same invisible guy bouncing against the walls like a ghost in panic. It took me a few hours to realize that I called the whole thing on myself by stating that life after death could reveal itself to me. At the cemetery the day before, I seriously expected it to do so. The fact that my girlfriend experienced the exact same thing confirmed for me that this was not a mental thing that happened in my head. I probably would have dismissed the whole thing otherwise. Since that day, I have the feeling that the whole life or death thing is more magical than we perceived it. And with magic, I mean that we not yet have any idea about how and why. I guess the guy with his beer belly and goatee was hanging around his own graveyard at the cemetery. Maybe he died not so long ago and was still in panic about the situation. I come along ignorantly inviting every dead person in the graveyard for coffee. Somehow, he's interested, but can only come around late at night like ghosts do. He then tries to reach at me with his panic bouncing ball thing, but it's bad communication, and because of my fear, I just keep laying there still like I don't even notice him. I'm trying to talk to the guy in my head to make him go away, but that evidently doesn't reach him at all. And after a while, he decides to leave because nothing is happening. I'm very happy that he is gone, and I fall asleep like a prince.